Alrighty, thank you everyone for sticking around, for joining us for our third panel of the day. Black Heroes Matter, the importance of Black heroes, leads, and protagonists. So I'm gonna read the summary really quick before we get started. Seeing and not seeing Black characters in popular media serve as both a reflection of and an impact on perceptions of Black heroism and valor. So this will be a community discussion of personal and cultural impact of Black characters across popular media through the ages. So I'm gonna let each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then I'll talk a little bit about our organization, Color Fandom, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So Jacques, you wanna start?
Hey everyone, my name is Jacques Nyemb. I am a small independent publisher of comics, picture books, books of short stories. I'm based in Graham, North Carolina, and I love writing stories that center Black characters in a variety of ways, rather from stories that are sci-fi to picture books, as I mentioned earlier, as well as zines, where I work with a bunch of different artists in terms of creating stories and writing a variety of stories.
Sorry, I could do a better clap later. Excuse me. My name is Burnham. I am a writer. Mostly I do comic books. I've done a few stories for DC Comics so far. Hopefully I'll get to keep going, but it's no problem because I do a lot of independent stuff. Tuskegee Years is like probably the most popular series that I've done so far. I also write children's books. I edit. What else do I do? Did I say publisher? Because I publish a lot of books too.
My name is Deborah Ulmer. I am not a professional. I am a co-administrator of Color Fandom, and I'm the layperson on the panel. I grew up in a household that we third generation raised on sci-fi and horror, so I'm like a media nerd.
So I will say, like our panel says, Black Heroes Matter, and Deborah is one of our heroes for Color Fandom. Every time she's on the panel, she underplays the importance of her role in our organization. She pretty much keeps us going, organizes almost all of the things we do, handles all of our social media. My head would have exploded today if it wasn't for her. So she is a local Black hero for our organization. So that's my 2 cents. And my name is Robyn. I am also one of the administrators of Color Fandom. We are the co-hosts of this program today, along with the Durham County Library. So as I mentioned in the beginning of our other panels, Color Fandom is a social club, so all of you are welcome to join us. We do local meetups, and that's part of where Deborah comes in, making sure that we're active and people are connecting. But we exist as a safe space for people who do have marginalized identities to talk about how those identities impact their fandom and how their fandom impacts their identities and are informed vice versa. So this panel, as we mentioned, Black Heroes Matter. So let's start out laying some groundwork. So what makes a well-defined character? Just full stop there. What makes a well-defined character? And then give an example that you feel of a character that fits those parameters that you have then defined.
You first.
That giving me a chance to think this, a well-defined character. From my perspective, I think a well-defined character is one that is based in some sort of truth. There has to be some sort of element of believability within a character. So they can be fantastic and amazing. And as a writer, the part that I care the most about a character, are they believable? Are they realistic, even in an unrealistic situation? I believe that that's a key part of a good character for me. And for me, a good example of that, all right, I know a lot of writers, so now I have to pause and think of a good character that I'm thinking.
Black character.
A black character, of course. That was in my head, black character. That's the default in my head, but let's see. Let me see. I'm only saying recently just because I literally opened this book and read it. Nubia with Stephanie Williams, her recent book. I was reading that, the new Nubia run. That was a good character reimagined, rewritten from her perspective. I liked that book because that's the first thing I just recently finished reading. So.
Okay.
So I think like characters, like when you're able to make characters like resonate with people, which I guess there's so many different ways to get around that, but creating a character that has, like you just feel, so I think about like Annie. Everybody seen Sinners? If you haven't, I'm judging you. Judging you. So they created this character, like played by a British woman, as somebody that lived in Louisiana for a long, long time. The way that the effort that she put into the dialect was the first thing that caught me, and it was really early, and it wasn't like long soliloquies. It was like, "Smoke, what are you doing here? Why are you back here?" You know, just the way she's saying it. And then everything that was built. This movie is expansive. There's a lot of moving parts, so nobody gets like 45 minutes of character development. But what they're able to do in that short amount of time by her dialogue, the authenticity of her dress, her demeanor, like her cadences, like it, you know, you put a lot into getting, you know, these short bursts of excellence. So I don't know if there's like one particular way to create that. Sometimes your fans are the ones that tell you, 'cause you'll be like, "Yo, this is my character right here," and everybody's like, "We like that one," you know. So, but I think it's, you know, just, you know, creating in a way to where it resonates with someone, and that's always like my mind state. I don't want to have like a box check, like, "Ooh, I need a girl," yeah. And then I just do, you know, if I put this character into my story, I need that person to be like a real person. And that's how I look at characters.
So like the authenticity of it,
Yeah, it's like, just not, like you see it so easily, right? Like, oh, they put this kind of character in so they can check the LGBT, or they can check the handicap, or the, you know, the racial. I don't ever want to do that. I want it, like, characters that are in the story to be like real humans in real life.
And just using Sinners as an example, as I was watching the credits, they had so many consultants for different aspects of that. Like you said, to have the authenticity of the character, to make sure that they didn't just, you know, check the box and move on. They were actually talking to people of those cultures to make sure that they got it right.
Yeah, and again, my Louisiana expertise. I've heard people, I've seen them online, they're like, "Why is it?" And it's like, no, that's real. Like, you know, the Chinese people having businesses in the town, the right side of the one side of the street is black, the other side is white. Like, there's so much, and that's one of the things I love about Ryan Coogler, all the way back to Black Panther. It's like he went to Africa and spent 6 months just traveling, you know, different places, sitting with cultures, learning, you know, and then
documentaries on the work that he did and that Lucas did to learn the music. Yeah.
That's just as phenomenal as the movie, you know, and that's how you can feel it come through the movie.
So, like, growing up, you attach to anybody that looks like you know, more. And, you know, we had little breadcrumbs, you know, like I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. But now you have more characters that are fully realized for what I think, like not cookie cutter, but show a full range of emotions, be it good or bad, and has, if they're not the main character, has a full story and with a backstory and family outside of the main character. Two characters that I think that have been improved on, and as their stories are being told and retold more, is Uhura in Strange New Worlds, and in the Kelvin timeline of Star Trek, which are like the newer Star Trek movies. You see more of her story. May not be much enough, but at least it's more than what we grew up on with the original. And then I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. So in her, and it's partly because of the actress, in the TV version is she has a fully developed story than it was in the comics.
So for me, what makes a well-defined character is for them to have a backstory that makes their current story make sense. Like, do we understand their motivations? Do we understand why they do the things that they do? Do we understand why they think and feel the way that they think, even if we don't agree? Because for me, some of the most well-defined characters are people I don't even like. But because the creative team took the time to allow us to get to know them as people, to allow us to know their understandings and their backgrounds and why they do the things that they do, to me makes a well-defined character. So I have two great examples. If anyone has seen the show, the Apple TV show Foundation,
Yeah.
I think Salvor Hardin is an amazing character, and all of the characters are so very well defined. And I think hers is a great example. And just going with the tropes, Killmonger is a great villain, but with that movie, we got so much of his backstory that even if we didn't like the things that he was doing, we were like, all right, I get it though. I understand it. So yeah, to me, if we can see the progression of why they are the people that they are, I feel that makes a well-defined character. So the next question for you guys. Does a black character need to be relatable or sympathetic or like either or both, what have you, to non-black audiences in order to be successful? Why do you give me that step down, Rick? You want me to repeat it?
No, I heard you.
Oh.
From a creator's perspective, I believe that as a writer, you write from your heart. And for me, in my perspective, I believe that the character should be true to you and make you happy at the end. And for me, I don't believe as a writer to write to make a character to be sympathetic, more of a character to be understood from my perspective. So a character can be disliked. It may not be a character that anyone can understand, but I'm writing as a black person and wanting other black people who are reading my stories to either relate, to feel something from it. And if other readers who are not black who read it, I want them to enjoy the story, but I have been in situations where and you were even in the room when that happened, where I read my story and I could see black listeners, their face were different. Yeah, and the white readers didn't see what was, listeners didn't see what was going on, and then I got to the end and then everyone understood where I was going. But my story was not aimed to be palatable, I wanted the story to be said. And however you feel about the character is you, but I want the reader on the other end to feel seen and to feel like someone cared about them in crafting what they created. And for me, the audience that I'm aiming is black readers, but anyone who reads it can gain something from it.
So, I guess looking at it from my side, when I was little, for about a year and a half of my life, I wanted to be Bo Duke.
Do that?
Yeah. And I had nothing in common with Bo Duke. But Bo Duke was cool. He got to drive most of the time. And they screamed yeehaw. I didn't know what that flag on the top of it. I just knew these dudes were cool. They was on TV. I've never been on a farm. I mean, I might have visited or whatever, but like nothing about that. I say that to say that if I'm able to be a fan of Bo Duke, then you can be a fan of my characters without me trying to, like acquiesce or trying to make you feel comfortable. We've seen it. I got an awesome chance to write Superman for a Halloween anthology, and I had some of my friends that was like, how much research are you gonna do? And I was like, I don't have to do any research. I've been bombarded with Superman my whole life. Like, it's not hard, right? So I just write characters. If they resonate with you, that's cool. But I think that we start losing when we start trying to figure out how to make characters feel a way that's gonna make, we start thinking about how we're gonna make readers feel. I just write the characters. I have like a broad stroke. And this dude in Brooklyn, I have a book called The Search for Sadaka. It takes place in the 1920s. Young black girl is the main character. And it's this Caucasian dude in Brooklyn who's like I'm not gonna say his name, but he's one of like my biggest fans of that series. And he's just like, when's the next one coming? I'm gonna get this. I sent this one to my daughter, And I didn't do anything like to, in the book to make him feel like, okay, I'm welcome here. I didn't make him feel like he was not welcome. It's a book. He loves the character. He loves the story. So that's just my thought process behind it. That's why I was
Give that I will say I've been saying that character's name wrong. I read your book and I thought her name was Sadiqa.
Everybody does. I'm not mad at it, but it's
Okay, well now that I know, and so my internal voice will now say her name properly.
I can give, especially for TV media, 3 characters that are leads in their show, and characters that are co-leads in their show that have like messed up, and people, the wider audience still accepts them. Is there's a show called Found.
Oh yeah.
On NBC. That the black woman lead is the kidnapper of her kidnapper, but
That's not a spoiler, that's in like the trailer.
yeah, it's in the show. No, it's in the show. It's in the show. Angela Bassett's character on 911, and Queen Latifah's character in Equalizer. They're all nuanced, they're like we were saying with the first question, they're fully realized because they do good and bad things, and they're able to lead shows.
I feel like also kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying, Greg, it almost feels like at a certain point it ends up becoming a trade-off. If you attempt to make your character too sympathetic to people who do not share a common background, then they end up feeling inauthentic. And I feel that a lot of characters, black characters, that were steeped in stereotypes is because creators were trying so hard to make them sympathetic in order to appeal to, let's be real, white audiences. And, just to get them kind of like springboard, to get them off the ground. That at a certain point, they end up losing their authenticity to what the actual real lived black experience would have been for a character who is living out those types of stories. So I get it, at the end of the day, these characters are there, people are trying to make money. But like you said, I feel that we're in a time now that people are realizing that just because I don't have the same lived experience as a character, doesn't mean that I can't enjoy this story, that I can't sink into this story and find a way to be entertained by this character, even if I don't find them sympathetic, even if I don't maybe find them relatable, but to be entertained by that character.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say there was a time period where Punch and John from Chips, I'm really old, I don't know if I remember. They were also like my favorite, and again, nothing, right? But you can learn about other cultures, you know, you can learn. So if I make like a whitewashed black character, people will be like, is this really how black? Nah, this ain't how blackness goes, you know? So I'm gonna make these characters and they're gonna stand in who they are. And like we see it, like if you're lucky enough to get to talk to people who've read your works, like they'll tell you, man, I learned like a lot with reading Tuskegee Years. It's like, that's the plan, you know? So, you know, there's a lot of learning, and let's face it, in this country, especially with all the segregation that's happened, how much do we know about other cultures based off of media?
Yeah.
Right? A lot of it, you know, whether it's TV, music, books, whatever. So it's like, there's ways that you can expose people to your culture. Like Sinners is the perfect, it's my favorite thing right now. Don't tell my daughter that. But yeah, it's so good, and it's introducing people to blues music and all these different things at the same time. So.
Yeah. I think that also says something about the way that we tell stories, or that we have told stories in this country, is that most people learn about non-white American culture through pop culture and their media. And I think personally that's another reason why it's incredibly important to make characters authentic, even if they are relatable and or sympathetic, because so many people of the dominant, in quotes, culture learn about the rest of us, not through school, but through pop culture. And so when they're absorbing these stories that are inauthentic and false, then they take those perceptions and interact with real people, thinking that these characters are accurate reflections of us when they are not. So to me, that's part of why it's so important to have stories like Tuskegee Heirs, like Black Living, you know what I mean? To just give those nuances of what real people actually look like through these fictional characters. Okay, so my next question, I wrote these questions before we had this amazing conversation, because y'all, I know y'all gonna probably have some interesting answers to this one. So is race bending a necessary step to get more visibility to Black protagonists to, again, in quotes, mainstream audiences? We all know what that means. White people. What are some pros and cons of race bending? And when and how should a story be adapted along with the change of character? So in other words, if you change the character, sometimes you have to change the story. Sometimes you don't. What are some examples of those times? That's what I say.
Oh, okay.
I thought I said race bending.
I was saying people know what that word means.
Oh, does anybody not know what that, I'm sorry.
Huh?
Race swapping. So if you take for, you know, a character, so for instance, like, we were talking about, Deborah and I were talking about, like, Nick Fury's a black guy now. Yeah. So if you take a character who was traditionally white and make them black. You want to start? Deborah, do you want to start since you're,
Well, that was asked. So I don't think it's a necessary step, but it's a good step if the original is lacking. You know, like I said before, we're lacking to see us, and especially for to be represented for younger people. Like an example of having a Black Ariel in the live action Little Mermaid. You saw a lot of girls come to the theater black and white of all races come as Ariel, but especially the black girls. But then on the flip side, you also have an original character, Tiana, that girls were able to look up to. So I think if it's equally done, but just done well, then it works. As you mentioned before, as far as the race swapping, I had in my notes, Nick Fury, when Samuel Jackson was cast as Nick Fury, but then after they race swapped him also in the comics too, and it didn't cause a huge uproar, as some characters do, especially black female characters. Or another side of it is it when a black character is taking up a mantle where previously it's been a white character, like Riri and Iron Man, or Miles Morales and Spider-Man, or Sam Wilson as Captain America.
So you mean like they're unique characters, but just past the title as opposed to like taking on that identity?
Yes. Yes.
Greg, Jacques? You guys, Greg or Jacques, either of you want to answer that? Or did you have more to add?
But just about the last part of the question. I didn't want to take up so much time. An example of a good, my favorite example of how a good race swap story is the new Interview with the Vampire series. Louis was the actor is race swapped, but in order to do that, they actually moved up the timeline, so he's not a slave owner, and him and his family are Creole in the 1910s, so they're affluent black people that were able to own businesses in New Orleans. And they really expound on his family and the culture.
So, a lot of people from the comics world, like, and you'll see a lot of black people that they hate, like, the, race swapping, and they hate legacy characters. I don't care about none of that. I like seeing black people get jobs, so I honestly don't care. I was doing a Mr. Terrific story. I was like, I'm gonna read all the Mr. Terrific stuff I can find. And that was when I found out that he was a legacy character. That they're, and I think I'd be like trying to feel like I know stuff about comics. But, and a legacy character is just like when there's one, so like there's a Batman, and now there's like a black Batman, so they call him legacy. Which is different than race swapping, because Nick Fury was white, they turned him black. So just in case everybody doesn't understand that. So I don't really care. I do think that we need to look at the next part, and this probably doesn't go for anybody who took their time out to come to an AfroFuturism, day on a Saturday. But there's a lot of people where if they don't recognize where this comes from, if they don't see that bat signal or that S on the chest or something, they don't think it's valid. So that's the part to me, which is like where we should be educating the community to say, the only difference between this and this is that this is DC and this is Jacques, and so his character is just as valuable as any character that they created. And once we get that mind state, then they won't even be doing the swapping as much, because from their, as publishers and media companies, their mind state is, if I put this spider signal on this little black boy, it's gonna go crazy, But they wouldn't have to do that. If you look at the times when original characters get created in comics, those books don't sell a lot. So it's like, if we as a consumer can get to a point where it's like, I see value, it doesn't have to just be, cookie cutter, thrown on my plate. I'm gonna go hunt and find out the stuff that's good, then I think it cuts it down a lot. Again, I don't have a problem with it because I understand how valuable that exposure is. For people of my age or in my age range, you remember how excited you would be to see a speckle of black in science fiction or superhero type stuff. So as much as the more I see, the better. I don't care how it got there. We'll work on that later.
Actually, this dovetails perfectly, and it's like you lob something for me to continue. From my end, I'm an indie publisher, so the indie hat, I jump in and is like, I just want to make new things. I appreciate legacy characters. I appreciate their interest because they pull me into liking comics and enjoying it. But the reason why I started Not So Super over 12 years ago was because I just wanted the characters and the type of comics I wanted to see. I did not see enough of them. But then when I got in there, I noticed Greg and a whole bunch of other people were also making books alongside with me. And I realized that we all have characters, books, and things that can actually be pop culture if, as you said earlier, if people were educated. But one thing that is very interesting is I've done a lot of indie, a lot of library cons, a lot of conventions in various places, and I've been a lot of kids' first books. So they don't know the other stuff. Like my children, a lot of the comics and the books they have is the books of all the other publishers I know. And for them, they are the standard versus everyone else, and they tell it to their friends. And it's interesting because I think we're in a new era now where a lot of people, I'm not saying that the shows and everything that are out right now are bad, is that I do feel that as an indie, since I'm sitting here, I do feel like it's also good for us to challenge ourselves and go out there and look at things that are outside our comfort zone, because you'll be surprised about that the character that you're looking for already exists and is already here, and it's just a matter of you just taking a risk and trying something different.
So I want to take it back to something that Deborah said in answer to a different question. Hopefully, in the time of your daughters growing up, society is definitely changing, but we're seeing some of those like vestiges still today. But similar to you, Deborah, when I was growing up, people of color were forced to see themselves in these like one or two side characters, tertiary characters, and we were told that we should be able to connect to a white character anyway. But once we made that choice, then we were like, oh, you can't be Batman because you're not white. You can't be this character because you're black. Okay, well then once they created a black Superman or a black Batman, oh my God, we can't have this. So it's like, okay, so where does this space get created for us to exist in these places, in these fandoms? Because I agree with the sentiment, like you were saying, Greg, that ultimately we want to be able to just have original characters just exist and thrive. But we're honestly not there yet. As a society, we are not there yet. They just don't have the popularity. They don't get the eyes on them. And so then when we do, to try to make the in-between, to have like a legacy character like Riri or someone who's an original character who takes on the mantle, it's still a problem. So it's like, well, where do we fit in? Where can we fit in? Original characters are not popular enough. Race swap characters shouldn't exist. Taking on the mantle is, oh, you're replacing XYZ somewhere else. It's like, y'all gotta make up your minds. You know what I mean? For us to be able to, you can't tell us that we are welcome in these spaces and in these fandoms and then have these types of responses when characters that look like us when characters that share our backstory or our lived experience, when they are created, you can't have it both ways. You can't tell us that we are welcome here and then have those types of responses to those types of characters. That's just my opinion. Okay, so one last question for our panelists, and I'm gonna open it up to Q&A if the audience has any. Are Black and POC protagonists more often given storylines with a message? A lot of times we hear like, oh, it was so heavy-handed, blah, blah, blah. Is there a responsibility of storytellers to craft stories with a societal impact if they include marginalized protagonists?
I just feel like there needs to be interesting stories. From my perspective, I feel like interesting stories that feature Black people do not have to have a message. It feels too much like 1980s PSA television. I feel like
Do you know where your kids are?
Yeah, do you know where they are? But I feel interesting stories excites the mind and get people interested in things. So I feel interesting stories is a better direction than attempting to make characters fit whatever model of what society feels at that moment is morally right. You know, because a lot of times when you do those things, time passes and then what was said at that time to be correct is no longer correct. You know, so I just feel like it's better to tell a timeless, interesting story versus trying to force morality or force virtue on Black characters.
Yeah, force is a great word. If I peel back like one more layer to that, it's like if we're telling interesting, authentic stories, then they're gonna have some type of social repercussions anyway.
That's fair.
You know, I mean, just based off of where we live, the history of the country, how people are treated, you know? So it's like, you don't have to go out of your way. You shouldn't go into it like, I'm about to do the I Have a Dream speech at this book. You shouldn't be like that deep into it or anything, but you know, oftentimes, think about like Boys in the Hood. It's a great movie. You know, the message is there, but there's so many underlying, you know, things happening in that movie that like, I can relate to this. I've never been in a gang, you know, but I can relate to this part, you know? So it's like, if you're telling an interesting story, it's gonna have like some level of impact anyways, right? Think about like Living Single, which some people say Friends copied off of, right? It's a story about a group of friends, you know, living in close proximity. There's hijinks, there's all kinds of stuff, but there's underlying things happening because, yeah, you might get harassed today on your way to work, you know? So if it's authentic, it's already gonna be there. I think for a long time, that was, I don't know if it was the real rule, but it was the unwritten rule. I always point to like Boomerang. I think it's being like the first time where it's just Black people existing in a big movie, you know? I'm sure it happened other places, but that movie to me was like a trendsetter because it was just Black people. They were well-to-do. There was no gunfights, nobody, you know, getting pulled over. You know, it was just a good movie about regular people, the type of stuff that some of us experience in our regular lives, right? So just make it good, you know, that's fine, but when it's like, oh, I gotta, you know, make sure that I get this message home, nah.
I think horror does somewhat a good job at that when the protagonist is Black. There's a series called Domino Day, she's a Black witch, and she finds a coven with, it's a mixed coven, but the leader is also Black, but she has African heritage, and it shows her when she goes back to her ancestors and she can reach them to pull, you know, her for her coven. And then another example is when we were talking, I thought about it. Uh, okay. Yeah.
Just
So-
blurt it out.
Yeah, don't feel bad about interrupting me. Yeah. So, I kind of agree with what you were saying, Greg, that, to a certain extent, to tell a good story, it's gonna have some type of societal impact, something that we can relate to, because regardless of, how we look at it, every person's lived experience is a type of culture, is a type of politics. We just assign a default to one or the other and remove those labels, but everyone's lived experience has that in some way. I feel that the responsibility of storytellers when they are using marginalized characters is to make sure that you represent that character with care. If you are going to, try to not have a message, make sure that you aren't inadvertently putting a message in there because you haven't done your research to understand what are some of the types of things that may impact this community that you weren't aware of. Like, don't make comparisons of Black people to primates. You know what I mean? You may think that in your story that this is just a thing, but there's a long history there. So you may think, oh, you're just telling a story, and you're inadvertently creating a message because you haven't done your research, you haven't taken care to understand what creating that character actually means in that story, because you haven't thought about the history.
I remember.
Okay.
Because your comment sparked me from another. So in Jordan Peele's movies, of course, they, especially the first one, has a message. But then when you go to the other ones, they could be played by any race, especially in Nope. Yes.
I love that movie.
I love Nope. A lot of people don't, but I love
I
it.
don't care about those people. It's one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yes. Yeah, the family, they have, the family leads are Black. And because of, some people won't catch it, but they have their own code and stuff that they play off each other that, is relatable as a Black person, but they have like their sibling relationship relates to everybody, and it's not like there's a message, like that type of message. It's not a race message in that movie.
Yeah. So for our audience, does anyone have a question or a comment or anything? So we'll have.
Also, if y'all haven't seen Nope, it's a beautiful, beautiful movie.
Nope.
It's like if John Coltrane made a horror movie. It's spectacularly beautiful and wonderful.
So, two of some of my favorite Black characters, female characters, Abby from Sleepy Hollow, I don't know if anybody remember that. I loved Sleepy Hollow. She was a very realized character. She was in a setting that a lot of people wouldn't expect a Black character to be, let alone a woman. She was a sheriff, and she was just kind of dropped in this fantasy that had historical background, and it was just great. And she realized she had family. She had her own backstory. Her boss was a black man, Orlando Jones. And so I have issues with Sleepy Hollow toward the end of the seasons, but her character in general was a very just full character, especially in the first season. And then the second one is, I don't know if anybody's watched The Residents, Cordelia Coop, who is a birder. And so that's another story where you're kind of just dropped into the middle of it, and she is a central character. She's a detective, smartest person in the room every time, and she is fully realized. They discussed her background, they discussed her nephew.